On today's episode, I'll go over the biggest Blackhawks storylines to watch throughout training camp.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman2. Be sure to go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account as well at Talkin' Hockey, so that way you can get all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And last but certainly not least, got to let you know today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Be sure to go and visit FanDuel.com right now to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Training camp is set to officially open up in just 2 days' time, Blackhawks fans. But first, just as a quick reminder, I do want to let you know that when training camp officially opens up on Thursday, my episode for that day will be dropping in the afternoon, probably around 6 p.m. Central Time or something like that, just so that I can recap everything that went down on the first day of training camp, plus General Manager Kyle Davidson's interview with the Blackhawks media. So just wanted to remind you all that Thursday's episode not going to be dropping in the morning, going to be coming out Thursday afternoon. And I'm also going to be having a roundtable come out sometime this week as well, where I'll be sitting down with all the rest of the Locked On Central Division hosts, going through each one of our teams and their outlook for this upcoming season. That's either going to be dropping tomorrow or on Friday. So just a couple of things to keep in mind for the show this week. But yes, training camp opens in just about 48 hours time. Hockey season continues to knock on our doors. And with that being the case, I thought it would be smart to center today's episode around one big training camp preview to give each of you Blackhawks fans out there everything you need to know when camp gets underway on Thursday. And so there aren't any surprises when everything gets back into action. But first and foremost, what I want to start segment one with today is two kind of questions. First, what does this training camp mean for the Chicago Blackhawks? And also, why is this training camp in particular important for the future of the Blackhawks? This training camp means and kind of symbolizes to me the turning of the tides here in Chicago with this team. Now, I'm not saying it's time to go and raise our hopes and our expectations and get ready for this team to get back into the playoffs or even contending for the Stanley Cup playoffs. I don't think we're there yet. We still have a long ways to go until we reach that point. However, after kind of being the laughingstock of the NHL these past few years while rebuilding, it's finally time to start playing competitive hockey once again. And that really starts that entire process really starts when training camp opens up this week on Thursday. And I feel the changing of the tides is happening, or hopefully will happen, because of the competitive nature of this Blackhawks team in this training camp in particular. And I really do hope, Luke Richardson and the entire coaching staff embodies that kind of vibe upon these players throughout these couple of weeks leading up to the start of the regular season. And I know training camp is never going to be what it used to be, right? Where players were getting absolutely worn down, skating up and down the ice. You were going to put them back into shape. Those days are kind of in the past, but I do really hope this coaching staff demands hard work and excellence and darn good execution day in and day out. Because if you bring anything less than that, if you're a fringe player who's trying to make this roster, or a fringe guy who's trying to earn a spot in the lineup come opening night, if you bring anything less than your best and you're not working hard and you're not executing out there like you're expected to, then you're not going to make this roster. It's as simple as that. And if you are someone who is already an established NHL, or if you don't have any risk of being sent down to the minors, you're still in jeopardy of losing your spot come opening night, because this Blackhawks team, based on the additions they made in the offseason, they have bodies both up front and on the defensive side of things. They're deep at both positions. So even if you are an established guy who's, maybe slacking or not putting your best foot forward to start off training camp, you could be bumped down the lineup, or you might not have the spot you were kind of expecting on paper when things actually shake out come October 8th when the Hawks hit the ice against Utah. Because this roster is so deep from the top to the bottom, everyone has to be putting their best foot forward day in and day out. So I think that's what this training camp means for the Chicago Blackhawks. It's time to finally flip that switch, start executing, and put together a full team. That's why I feel like this training camp symbolizes the turning of the tides vibe-wise, kind of, just with this organization, because there really hasn't been that expectation or that mentality thrown upon the team when training camp opens up, just because of the position the Blackhawks were in. It was kind of easy to predict that the Blackhawks would struggle these past couple of years based on the roster they put together. I don't think they're going to be, again, a playoff contender, but I certainly think they're capable of being much better than they were these last handful of years based on the amount of talent, the amount of veterans that they've brought in, the youngsters that are stepping onto the scene. It feels like a really good mixture, and that's also why this training camp is important for the Blackhawks. Well, first and foremost, this training camp is important because of their goal, because they want to take that next step this season, because they do want to be better. And if they don't execute, and if they don't make every day, every opportunity, every practice count, then they kind of risk not achieving that goal, not taking strides as a team this upcoming season. And it's also important because it's going to set the tone not only for just the rest of the season moving forward, but I also think it's going to set the tone for training camps moving forward as well. And I just kind of talked about the mix of youngsters and veterans that the Blackhawks have in this locker room right now. Well, Connor Bedard, Kevin Korchinski, Alex Vlasic. I know Oliver Moore is not a pro, but he'll be part of this training camp, right? Like, these are huge, crucial Ethan Del Mastro on the back end, along with, Nolan Allen, these types of guys, Wyatt Kaiser, right? Like, these are guys who are hoping are going to be cornerstone pieces of this franchise moving forward. And they're getting a really good opportunity to learn from the veterans who are here, who might not be here in 2 to 3 years' time, when that weight actually might shift over to the players that I just mentioned. And they're going to be looked at as kind of the leaders and the cornerstones to move this franchise in the right direction. They're going to be the ones relied upon to kind of set the tone and provide the right message to the next group of youngsters that are coming in. It all kind of starts right here, right now, again, for the turning of the tides for this Blackhawks organization. It's not going to be a quick journey. It is still going to be a long process for the Hawks to get back to where they want to be. But it really does, I feel, start with this training camp, because if this season goes well, then I really feel like that can just snowball momentum for the Blackhawks in terms of, we know they're probably going to spend some more money next offseason, right? More youngsters are going to be established on the NHL scene. There's going to be another group of young guys making a leap to the pro level, and then hopefully that snowball just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger until the Blackhawks become an absolute wagon. But I really feel like it starts right here, right now. This is an important training camp for the Chicago Blackhawks, and I really couldn't be more excited for things to get underway on Thursday, because I'll tell you what, this Blackhawks team is slept on. But if they play tough, they play fast, and they play together, they are going to be a very difficult team to play against in the regular season. I still think, I've kind of brought this up a couple of times on the show when kind of projecting what I envision the Blackhawks to do this year. I still think they lack that elite offensive ability and playmaking skill, right? Like, yeah, they brought in Teuvo Teravainen, they brought in Tyler Bertuzzi, they have Taylor Hall. Those guys are certainly more capable offensive players than they had, but I still don't think they're in like the upper echelon or anything of like most skillful forward groups in the league. But I do think that based on the veterans they have, how much better I project their defense to be. They actually have some stability in net. I think they're going to be able to play with a better pace up and down the ice at both positions. Because of those things, I think the Blackhawks could be a really tough and difficult team to play against this season. But again, it all starts right here, right now. You got to set the tone in this training camp, and I really do believe they have a good mix of veteran leaders to kind of show these young guys how it's supposed to be done. And it feels like this is a really good batch of youngsters too, guys who are wanting to learn and wanting to take in all that knowledge and kind of utilize it right here, right now to give them their best chance of making this roster and putting their best foot forward and having a lasting impression on this coaching staff, and also to kind of take that and put it into the long term and be the future leaders of this organization. I think it's a really, really crucial and meaningful next couple of weeks for the Chicago Blackhawks. And again, couldn't be more excited for things to get underway on Thursday. But there is my quick little preview over why this training camp is important for the Blackhawks and what it means for this organization. I'm going to take a quick break, but coming up in just a moment, when I return, I'll dive into the biggest storylines to watch during Blackhawks training camp. But first, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. I know you've all heard about FanDuel at this point in time by now, right? Of course. But now FanDuel has something a little bit different for all of you. Starting now through September 22nd, which is less than a week away, so time is ticking for you to get in on this deal. FanDuel is offering all customers who bet $5 down a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. You won't just be stuck with the Chicago Bears. And speaking of the Chicago Bears, I know it didn't go as we had hoped for them on Sunday night against the Texans, even though they did backdoor cover. And I think that's probably helped some folks out there. However, I am going to be betting on the Bears to bounce back this week in Indianapolis. I do not think the Colts are a very good team, and FanDuel is posting a nice little plus 110 line on the Bears right now to get to 2-1 and defeat the Colts in Indianapolis this weekend. If you want to tail me, you can get that plus 110 number by visiting FanDuel.com right now. And again, if you put $5 down, if you're not already a member, go and sign up and you'll get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube and YouTube TV. Again, go and check out FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just wanted to say thank you again for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. And a reminder to please go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Currently on the climb to 2,000 subscribers. Really want to hit that number before the regular season opens up. And go and make Locked On NHL your second listen of the day, where the action never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can easily find the link to Locked On NHL down in the description, or simply search Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you may listen to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2. Let's talk about all the important Blackhawks training camp storylines that you all should be keeping an eye on, shall we? And there are a lot of them, so make sure to stick with me here through this one. But this is a notable training camp for lots of different players, and there are a lot of different things that deserve to be watched over the next couple of weeks. First and foremost, though, starting things off at number 1 has to be Connor Bedard. All eyes are going to be on Bedard during his sophomore season as he opens things up in training camp. The main question surrounding Connor Bedard is going to be, is he ready to take that next step? Is he ready to burst into NHL superstardom? And after taking down the Calder Trophy, what I thought was pretty easily this past year, yes, Brock Faber had a great season, but I do not even want to envision what the Blackhawks would have looked like had they not had Connor Bedard. I know he didn't hit that point per game plateau like we wanted. He didn't reach the 30-goal marker, but considering the lack of help that he had alongside him, and just from the eye test, the way that he looked on the ice, it was a smashing success of a rookie campaign. I thought the development from that opening game against the Boston Bruins, or the opening game against the Colorado Avalanche, I guess I should say, he scored his first NHL goal against the Boston Bruins, all the way through the end of the season. I thought there was clear progression there out of Bedard, particularly in the playmaking areas and overall just his hockey IQ. I still think he's got a ways to go on the defensive side of things. I really hope he put in a lot of work this offseason at the faceoff dot. But yeah, the question around Bedard is, how does he fare during his sophomore season now that he actually has some more talent alongside him? He's actually going to have some talent to play with on the power play. The top line should be more capable than it was for all of last season. So all eyes are going to be on Connor Bedard and what kind of next step he's going to take during his sophomore campaign, because he was a superstar for the Blackhawks as a rookie. That buzz ain't going away anywhere now that the Blackhawks have a little bit more talent to put around him in the lineup. So that's the first kind of question, biggest storyline to watch during the preseason. Is Connor Bedard ready to take that next step, and how does he fare during his sophomore season now that the Blackhawks have actually put some what's the word I'm looking for? Some capable players around him. Second biggest storyline to keep an eye on for training camp involves Connor Bedard as well. Who are Connor Bedard's line mates? Really curious to see what the answer is going to be. Really curious to see what line rushes are going to look like when the Blackhawks open things up on Thursday. Does Philip Kurashev start alongside him? I mean, you need to give Philip Kurashev a lot of credit for his performance last year on the top line, right? The Blackhawks really needed someone to step up and play along with Connor Bedard, and no one did that better. No one took advantage of the opportunity more than Philip Kurashev did. I mean, just bursting through for career highs all across the board, showing us playmaking abilities, speed, and just an overall consistency that we had concerns about his first couple of years in the NHL. Does that earn Philip Kurashev an opportunity on the top line right wing along with Connor Bedard when things open up on Thursday? We shall see. Or, I mean, not only just or, Philip Kurashev could still be there. Do we see Tyler Bertuzzi take the left wing top line spot? Do we see Teuvo Teravainen in that spot? Do we see Taylor Hall return from injury in that position? Because, you know, that was kind of what he was brought in to do from the Boston Bruins when the Blackhawks acquired him via trade last summer as a former number 1 overall pick himself, not only to just kind of mentor Connor Bedard and show him the ropes, but the plan was for him to be on that top line, to be Connor Bedard's left winger. And then, of course, that obviously didn't go to plan, as I believe Hall only played in 11 of the 82 games last year due to a torn ACL. And speaking of Taylor Hall, the third biggest storyline that I have for all you Blackhawks fans to watch during training camp is, how does Taylor Hall look after missing all of last season? If you remember, we did get updates late in the year in like March and April that Taylor Hall was back skating. We knew that he wasn't going to return to game action, but it certainly was promising to see him back on the ice even before the start of summer, giving, you know, him and us Blackhawks fans confidence that he'll be able to have a full go of rehab and prep going into training camp here this season. I think that should be a huge advantage for Taylor Hall to get off to a faster start than players typically do when coming off of a torn ACL. Now, I would still imagine that he's going to have some rust to shed, and it's probably still going to be a little shaky for him out of the gate. But that is a huge, huge question going into this year's training camp. How does Taylor Hall look after missing all of last season, basically with a torn ACL? Next storyline I have is, where do Tyler Bertuzzi and Teuvo Teravainen shape into the top 6? Now, I figure both of them are going to have top 6 roles. I think it would be pretty natural for that. I kind of envision Bertuzzi starting up on the top line and Teuvo starting on the second line. But again, nothing is set in stone at this point in time. We don't know exactly where they're going to be. There's not like a hypothetical role that they could get thrown into. And we don't know how Luke Richardson is going to go about kind of going, combining line combinations together for at least the first week of training camp. So, excuse me, hiccup. Really curious to see where ultimately Tyler Bertuzzi and Teuvo Teravainen are going to shape into the top 6 and kind of how they look. Well, Tyler, in his first look of Blackhawks garb, Teuvo Teravainen obviously rocked that for a good chunk of the early portion of his career. Next training camp storyline that I have here is, where does Lukas Reichel begin the season? Based on, you know, the guys that I just brought up, Bertuzzi, Teuvo Teravainen, Taylor Hall's coming back, there's Connor Bedard, there's Philip Kurashev, there's Andreas Athanasiou, right? Like, doesn't exactly seem like an open top 6 spot for Lukas Reichel to take right out of the gate. And when not in a top 6 role so far in his NHL career, Lukas Reichel has really, really struggled. It seems pretty clear at this point in time, to me at least, that he has to play with some type of skill player. I don't ever see him really being the biggest driver of play. It still could happen because, quite honestly, the way that he was performing in training camp last year, I thought he was going to be a good driver of play. Just never wound up happening. The Blackhawks gave him chances to be a center. I don't think he's ever going to be a center. And as a winger, it's just harder to, you know, drive play. You just don't have as much space to operate. You don't get as many puck touches. So it's a really, really interesting spot for Lukas Reichel. I actually talked about this on Mailbag Monday yesterday. what is working in his favor is that the Blackhawks are going to be more talented up front than they've been since Lucas Reichel has been a pro at the NHL level. So if he does open things on the third line, like I kind of expect him to, I don't know exactly who he's going to be skating with, but I do feel like they're going to be more capable players, the word I was looking for earlier, than what he's been forced to play with down in the bottom six in the past. But at the end of the day, Lucas Reichel, he's going to have to prove himself. Like he's going to have a big camp to get a spot that'll be beneficial for him to open up the regular season. It has to be a very meaningful, a very impactful start right out of the gate for Lucas Reichel, just considering, again, all of the veterans that the Blackhawks brought into this forward group. And that also takes me to my next storyline. Where does Frank Nazar stand to begin training camp? Feels like there's still an outside, less than likely chance that Frank Nazar makes this team out of training camp, but out of anyone who's kind of out on the fringe, I do really think he has the best chance. And of course, as I talked about on yesterday's episode, he was the main takeaway from the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase this weekend. He was absolutely phenomenal in St. Louis in both games, particularly that second game. He was absolutely dominant, really took over, 3-point performance, exactly the type of showing and type of impression you wanted to see out of Frank Nazar at the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase against fellow prospects. Now it's going to be about, where did that performance this past weekend, where does that get him to open things up in training camp? It feels like if there is a spot for Frank Nazar to take, it's either the second line center or the third line center position. So if they do put him in kind of the NHL group, quote unquote, if you will, to open things up in training camp, that's probably where I would expect Frank Nazar to be, either at the 2C or at the 3C. But still, just because he had a good rookie camp doesn't guarantee that he's going to open things up on Thursday in that position. And regardless, whether he starts there or whether he starts on the outside looking in, it's going to have to be a very strong performance out of Frank Nazar in these next couple of weeks in the preseason as well, if he wants any chance to crack this team. But it's going to be really interesting to see where he starts on Thursday when practice begins, when training camp begins at Fifth Third Arena. Next training camp storyline to keep an eye on: where do you put Ilya Mikheyev, Pat Maroon, Craig Smith, and Joey Anderson? Out of those four, like, how is Luke Richardson and the staff going to go about things right out of the gate? I know it's going to be a competitive battle all throughout training camp, and all of these guys are going to be fighting to earn a lineup spot come opening day. But I'm really curious as to kind of where Luke Richardson has all of them sorted at this point in time. I think Ilya Mikheyev certainly has a lineup spot over the other three that I just mentioned, but Pat Maroon, isn't the best skater. He's not going to provide you with much offense, but you love his rugged style of play. He'll stand up for anybody out there. He's not afraid to mix it up. He's a big body. There certainly is value in that. Joey Anderson emerged as one of the best defensive forwards on the Blackhawks last year. So if you need more defensive style play in the bottom six, you can go with Joey Anderson. And then Craig Smith is just kind of a veteran that can provide you with a little bit of everything, right? Certainly doesn't have the wheels that he once did, but is probably a more capable offensive player than the two guys that I just mentioned, and can still, sacrifice, or doesn't have to sacrifice the defensive abilities. He's got some decent size to him, but, particularly those last three, Maroon, Craig Smith, and Joey Anderson, out of those guys, who's going to be thrown into the lineup right away and who's going to be on the outside looking in? And the next training camp storyline, I know there's a lot of them here, Blackhawks fans, but it is a very big training camp. Which young defenseman earns top six spots on day one, right? We know about the slew of defensemen who are trying to earn NHL jobs, but out of those ones, we have Seth Jones, Alex Vlasic, Connor Murphy, Alec Martinez, and TJ Brody. I think those five you can already pencil into the NHL lineup, assuming they're healthy. Outside of them, though, who's going to get that sixth spot? Is it going to be Kevin Korchinski? Is it going to be Wyatt Kaiser, Isaac Phillips, Ethan Del Mastro? Like, who is going to be the one that opens things up with the regular top six when things begin tomorrow? Also, who are kind of the odd men out? It feels like Ethan Del Mastro, Nolan Allen probably have the least likely chances of the guys that I just mentioned, but still, Wyatt Kaiser, Kevin Korchinski, Isaac Phillips, those three really are just fighting for one or two jobs. So really curious to see kind of how the coaching staff goes about that to open things up defensively. Also, speaking on the defense, is Alec Martinez going to play on the right side? Is he going to be the left-handed defenseman on the second pairing while Connor Murphy's on the right-hand side? And then TJ Brody is also someone who's played his off wing in the past, has actually averaged 20 minutes, I believe, in 11 of his past 12 seasons. So he's a minute muncher. Is he up on the second pairing ahead of Alec Martinez, or is he down on the third pairing playing his off wing with one of those young guys potentially? The defensive combinations also could go a lot of different ways. And then how far is Laurent Brossoit from returning? A really big addition, I thought, by the Blackhawks this offseason to solidify the net. We knew, though, or we found out a couple of weeks ago, that he was going to be out 5 to 7 weeks due to getting surgery on his MCL. Fortunately, it's not a long-term recovery for Laurent Brossoit, and I envision him to miss at least the beginning of camp, but will he be able to go at any point during the preseason to get some action before things open up on October 8th? Also, which fringe forward makes the biggest impression? I think Colton Dach and Landon Slaggert are probably the two guys outside of Frank Nazar in the forward group that have the best chance of somehow creeping onto this roster. But there are also other, players down in Rockford who are going to be trying to make a lasting impression as well. So who of those fringe players is going to impress the coaching staff the most? Who's going to make the most notable impression? Then we have which young defenseman creeps their way into the roster or onto the bubble. We saw it happen with Wyatt Kaiser last year. I think most people expected him to open the year up with the Rockford Ice Hogs in the AHL, but he was such a standout, in training camp that he really forced the Blackhawks coaching staff's hand. They had to keep him on the roster. Who is going to be that type of player on the blue line for the Blackhawks this year? And just all in all, outside of guys who are really trying to make the camp roster, which prospects stand out in camp and the preseason? Nick Lardis was certainly someone who stood out in the preseason last year. Martin Misiak, I remember him having a pretty good go of things. Paul Ludwinski, Samuel Savoie, Ethan Del Mastro, who are going to be the prospects like those guys from last year that stand out in preseason action, that make us a little bit more hopeful for their future and make it a little bit more fun following them wherever they may be with their respected junior or collegiate teams for this upcoming season. But there are the biggest Blackhawks training camp storylines I think you all should be keeping an eye on over these next couple of weeks. Coming up in just a moment, I still have to get into a former Hawks update as well as some key dates to keep in mind for the 2024-2025 NHL regular season. Real quick, just another reminder to please go and hit that like button, comment down below, and to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Thank you very much. And also, Mailbag Monday right around the corner. I know there are lots of you viewers or listeners who have Blackhawks questions. Be sure to throw those in the comment section down below if you're watching on YouTube, or can also DM me your question on any one of my social accounts. You can email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com, or even throw your question in the community tab on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. But segment 3, before I wrap things up, I did still want to be sure to go over some of the key dates that have been announced for the 2024-2025 NHL regular season. Some dates more notable than others, but just something to keep in mind that some of you might want to remember or mark the calendar for. First, the holiday roster freeze once Christmas time rolls around. December 20th through December 27th, all NHL rosters will be officially locked. Not the most notable date there. However, a notable one for sure is the NHL Four Nations Face-Off, which I think is going to be an awesome tournament in February this year. The United States, Canada, Sweden, and Finland taking on in the Four Nations Face-Off. That starts on February 10th and then runs all the way through the 21st. So remember, there won't be any NHL hockey going on through those dates. The NHL trade deadline, certainly a notable date to keep in mind. The Blackhawks actually have a game this night as it comes on March 7th, with the official deadline being at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central Time. Last day of the NHL regular season is officially April 17th, with playoffs starting 2 days later, as they typically do on April 19th. And then the last possible day of the Stanley Cup final. This is like, if all the series go 7 games, the longest the season could possibly go to is June 23rd, which is, funny enough, my father's birthday. Don't envision that the Stanley Cup playoffs will actually run that long, but it is the last possible day that the 25 season could run through. What I also wanted to get into here during segment 3 is just a little bit of an Hawks update, because there are several former Blackhawks who departed the organization this offseason who are now officially deemed Blackhawks legends that have gone on to either sign, 1-year contracts with other teams. Some of them are on PTOs to open up training camp with certain clubs. So I just wanted to be sure to go through all of this to give you all a reminder of where some of these Blackhawks legends are now taking the next step in their respected careers. Boris Tkachuk, one of my favorite Blackhawks, someone who I always thought was a little underrated and underappreciated, has officially signed a PTO with the Anaheim Ducks. No official contract for Tkachuk, but hoping to make a lasting impression during Ducks training camp. Same with Tyler Johnson, which I think is just crazy and is going to show you the league is just getting young. It's a young man's league. It is no other way to put it. It is a young man's league. It's all about speed. It's all about skill. And it's crazy to see Tyler Johnson on a PTO. This guy didn't even get a contract in the offseason. And it's not like he had a disaster of a year. Sure, he is getting up there in age. There have been injury concerns, but for none of the other 31 NHL teams to give him a 1-year deal, that to me is insane. Tyler Johnson currently on a PTO with the Boston Bruins. We'll see if he winds up signing a contract there or anywhere else. And what's even more mind-blowing is Tyler Johnson to get a contract, but Jared Tenorti did. Obviously a different position, but Jared Tenorti has inked a 1-year deal with the Calgary Flames. Taylor Radish has inked a 1-year deal with the Washington Capitals. Mackenzie Entwistle has a 1-year deal with the Florida Panthers, although that is a 2-way deal, and he'll probably start the year in the Panthers minor league system. If I had to guess, I was going to say Rockford. Colin Blackwell has signed a 1-year deal with the Dallas Stars, going back to Dallas. That is a 1-way deal. Jacob Megna is also with the Panthers on a 2-way deal, joining Mackenzie Entwistle. Reese Johnson has signed a 2-way deal with the Minnesota Wild, so we could be seeing him in Central Division action, possibly against the Blackhawks this year. Nikita Zaitsev, for those who don't know, literally just packed up and went back to the KHL, signed a 4-year deal there. I believe I was reading some interesting story or kind of some interesting inside joke that, I think Zaitsev might have literally picked up his stuff and left. I don't know how connected he was to this Blackhawks team or to the locker room or anything. It seemed like he was kind of a weird addition these last couple of years. Don't have anything official on that. Don't quote me on it, but it seemed like there was something a little weird going on with Zaitsev in the Blackhawks roster from what I've kind of been reading and what I've been told. Anthony Beauvillier signs a 1-year deal with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Always wishing the best for Tito Bovi. This guy was not a member of the Chicago Blackhawks last year, but last but certainly not least, Dominic Kubalik, after a struggling couple of years after leaving the Blackhawks, following being a Calder Trophy finalist, which was an unbelievable rookie campaign, if you all remember, he did not have a good year with the Ottawa Senators this past season and has packed up his bags as well and departed the NHL, going back to the National League, the league that he was once the MVP of when the Blackhawks signed him, and he became a Calder Trophy finalist during his rookie year. Yeah, he is going back to Switzerland in the National League, so wishing all the best to Dominic Kubalik and wishing all the best to these former Blackhawks as they embark upon the next step of their journey here as all of their training camps open up this week. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast. And please go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. It's free 100% and won't cost you anything. Really does help me out tremendously. That way you can also get the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded to YouTube each and every day. For my personal account, you can find me at Jack Bushman 2 on X. For my strictly Blackhawks account, check out at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, could possibly be the roundtable. Still not 100% sure, but I'll keep you all updated on that. Until the next episode, though, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.